Well, we got a glimpse tonight of what the Warriors could look like against real teams in the playoffs, real teams with real size when the level of physicality changes and goes up a notch in the playoffs, and the Warriors are running lineups that are too small and running lineups that have fundamental cracks in them, and then expect that somehow they're going to be able to reach the promised land doing all these nonsensical things that they've been getting away with in the regular season. The size thing was a huge issue once again in this game, and the starting lineup was simply not good enough to overcome a lot of the issues that they were having from a fundamental standpoint. I mean, Steph Curry took 10 shots and scored 3 points in this game. He shot 1 of 10 from the field and scored 3 points. It's going to be pretty hard to win any game like that. He was doing well from a creation standpoint. He had 7 assists in the first half. But the second half, Steph just never really got going. Just not a whole lot of energy, and succumbed to the game plan of the Rockets, where they're constantly throwing 2 at him with a lot of size. And for the first time and the longest time that I can think of, Curry got more or less completely shut down in the second half of this game. Now, there's a lot to get to in this video, starting with the size issue that the Warriors have had that's been ignored because they've been winning despite having those size issues. And the type of offense that they're running in this game is just not purposeful enough. They're just running motion to the ground for the most part. And I'm not sure why that is, because throughout the course of this past week, against playoff teams, the Grizzlies, the Lakers, and the Nuggets, the Warriors were perpetually looking for mismatches, cross matches, looking to attack this guy, looking to attack that guy, and a lot of that just did not happen in this game. And then we got to get to some other key issues. Draymond Green, the refs, Jimmy Butler, Jonathan Kuminga, Guy Santos. These are some key players in this game that must be addressed and discussed. But before we do, hello friends. Welcome back as always. This is a very tough loss. The Warriors had a chance to be supplanted into that 4th seed because the Nuggets lost tonight. And instead they dropped down to the 6th seed, and ultimately they're tied for that 8th seed, which is really insane. The Warriors could have been in the 4th seed. Instead, they're tied for the 8th seed. That's how insane the situation is right now in the Western Conference. That's what happens when the Warriors had to drop as many games as they did earlier in the season. Games they had no business dropping whatsoever. Just imagine, just think back to a terrible loss from earlier on in the season. Like, for me personally, the Jazz game, where they blew like an 11-point lead with 3 minutes left to go, and Steve Kerr is running a 3-guard lineup with no defense, and the Jazz, the pathetic, the worst team in the league, the Jazz, make a comeback against the Warriors, and the Warriors end up losing that game. If they had just won even that game alone, the Warriors are sitting in the 4th seed right now. But yes, by the way, this is indeed me, Jim Park. I know I look a little different today. I had a little bit of a shaving incident, and I had to get rid of my signature stash. It'll be back in a week or so. But yes, this is not the evil twin. This is me. If you like the content so far, you know what to do. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the Warriors fans out there. Alright, let's get straight to it. So as you guys know, when the Warriors start small, as they have been doing, it's Moses Moody and Brandon Podziemski who are usually taking a bulk of the shots. Yes, to start the first quarter and the third quarter, it's usually Pods and Moses Moody time for the Warriors. And when they're able to score, they can cover some of the deficiencies that they have in that starting lineup as a defensive group because they're just simply too small in a lot of matchups, especially against playoff teams. We've seen that against the Lakers, and we've seen that against the Nuggets. And to be honest with you, we've seen it against a bunch of other teams too. The Warriors starting lineup almost never establishes any power from a defensive standpoint. Usually, these two guys, Moody and Pods, are being heavily relied on for the scoring in the first 5 minutes of the game. And their scoring essentially is what's been sustaining that starting lineup, not anything close to what they've been able to do from a defensive standpoint. The numbers may tell you otherwise, but that's how I see it. At the end of the day, nothing is going to fool these eyes. And unfortunately, Moses Moody was absolutely dreadful and awful. The guy starts the game 0 for 4 in the first 5 minutes of the game, and he misses like 3 guys that are wide open within the first 5 minutes of the game. He misses a wide open Steph Curry and elects to shoot the shot himself and misses. There's another play in transition where Potts is wide open and Moses Moody once again, It's like I've been saying for a while now, Moody just doesn't have the passing gene. He just doesn't have the ability to see the whole floor. And a lot of times he just has tunnel vision. And he's just way too disconnected from that standpoint of the game. And just think, if he made that simple pass to Steph Curry when he was wide open, instead of taking the shot himself, maybe this ends up becoming a whole different game for Steph Curry. As we all know, all Steph Curry needs is to see one shot go through, and the whole thing can just change up for him, right? So Moody was very useless in this game, and despite that, the Warriors are able to hold ground and create some separation in that first quarter. By the time Steph Curry sat down at the 2-minute mark or so, the Warriors actually had a 9-point lead. But then in the final 5 minutes, they would end up getting outscored 2-5. Yeah, the Kuminga and Jimmy Butler lineup continues to look not good at all. There was at one point where Jimmy had to get on Kuminga because Kuminga tried to thread the needle where he didn't need to. Jimmy Butler was cutting into the paint to ultimately so that he can get into the post and create like he usually does. And you know, Kuminga got off to a good start. He made his first 2 shots. The first one was where he was trying to be patient as Steph Curry was coming around, and Kuminga is right here, and he passes the ball off to Steph. Steph Curry gets doubled, Kuminga cuts in, and he ends up getting a wide open layup at the rim. That's the kind of thing where if you play with Steph Curry, he's going to reward you. His next bucket was actually a movement shot where he's kind of relocating to the wing from the corner, and he shoots a 3-point shot in motion, and he made it. And then he's feeling himself. So now he's in the scoring mode, and the Warriors are able to get a stop, and they get out in transition, and Kuminga just decides to attack one-on-one. He dribbles in, finds nothing, and then he tries to dish it out, but the defense is completely recovered. And that's the kind of thing that cannot happen to end that first quarter in the Steph Curry segment, because Steph Curry just did nothing but cardio for the first 7 minutes of the game. It's time to get him some shots, and it's time to get him going, and it's time to look for him and prioritize him, because no bench player is going to be prioritized over Steph Curry. Am I right? Is that right? Is that okay to say? I mean, these are the undisciplined kind of things that just cannot happen for a team trying to contend for a title. These teams have to be razor sharp in what they're doing, understand and prioritize who are the most important players. And then there's going to be a time and a place where Kuminga is going to be able to get his, but he should almost never be prioritizing himself over Steph Curry if you don't have something in front of you. Next thing you know, Steph Curry has 2 shot attempts in the first quarter, and then he takes a seat. The guy just did nothing in the first quarter. Wasted. And those are the problems that they used to have before Jimmy Butler came along and the hierarchy got organized. Meanwhile, Guy Santos didn't get a single minute in that first quarter. Oh, that's different and very interesting, because in the previous game against the Nuggets, it turns out Steph Curry had told Steve Kerr that Guy Santos must close this game right now. Late in the fourth quarter against the Nuggets, the Warriors had a 13-point lead, and it was Steph Curry calling for Guy Santos minutes because they need his defensive versatility to close this game with a 13-point lead. Oh gee, that's interesting. That sounds familiar. So that happened, and then the next game comes, and now Guy Santos is entirely out of the rotation. You know, GP2 came back into this game. Welcome GP2, by the way. GP2 was awesome and did the best that he could. Was really efficient throughout the course of this game, minus in the second half where he had some trouble finishing in that paint as he normally does because Steven Adams got in the way of it. But yes, GP2 comes back and he plays like 3 minutes in that first quarter. Now, one good thing that did happen in that first quarter is that Kevon Looney ended up being the first center off the Warriors bench in the first quarter, and they need that. As long as they want to play Jonathan Kuminga, they cannot pair Quinton Post next to Jonathan Kuminga because that lineup is a joke from a defensive standpoint, and they just can't be doing that at this juncture of the season. Matter of fact, the second quarter comes, they run that usual Jimmy Butler-centric lineup, which includes Quinton Post. But look, it feels like he's been figured out. There's scouting report on him. There's an understanding now that he can't be left open because he's a great shooter. So now he's barely getting any chance to shoot. And even when he does shoot, he hasn't been shooting at the same rate that he had been because his legs are tired. He's hitting the rookie wall. At the same time, defensively, this is a joke. Him matched up against Steven Adams looked like child's play. Steven Adams is just moving Quinton Post out of there. It's a defensive rebound situation. Quinten Post is supposed to have positional advantage, and Steven Adams just gets him out of there literally like he's paperweight. And this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about when the competition becomes stiffer, more serious, stronger guys, more dogs that you find on real playoff teams. Quinten Post is too weak, he's not going to be useful, and the Warriors need to quickly adjust. Kevon Looney cannot literally be the only big the Warriors use off their bench. And if you can't understand that, then you'll understand why I have been pining for more Trace Jackson Davis minutes as the playoffs near, or the play-in nears. Because they're going to need him. They're going to need a secondary big body alongside Kevon Looney. It's time to get serious. The season is winding down and the Warriors are gearing for the playoffs. And having said that, if you want to take better advantage of Quinten Post, then you have got to use some pick and pop. The Warriors are almost exclusively running a bunch of motion offense when they run the Jimmy Butler stuff. And if you want to better take advantage of Quinten Post's ability to shoot, there's a very simple way to get him some shots, and that is the pick and pop. Pick and pop. High screen, Quinten Post, flash out, receive a simple pass from either Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, or Potts, and get a 3-point shot up. If you're not going to be able to get Quinten Post good looks, he should not be out on the floor whatsoever. Okay, and then the middle of the second quarter comes, Kuminga comes back into the game next to Steph Curry. And basically, the Warriors are running that Curry-centric lineup, except Guy Santos has been replaced by Jonathan Kuminga. And the Warriors were still working with a lead at the time, but then one possession, Jonathan Kuminga decides it's Jonathan Kuminga time. He gets by Dylan Brooks and then runs into Alperen Sengun and then just throws the ball away. Transition for the Rockets. GP2 plays great defense. They're able to get a stop. The ball gets in the hand of Jonathan Kuminga, who throws a lefty pass through the half-court line. Tari Eason swipes the pass and gets in transition for the easy dunk. And these things just cannot happen in what is pretty much a must-win for the Warriors. Because again, this is the difference between the 4th seed and the 8th seed. The Warriors need to win this game. It's a home game. They are fully healthy. They need to show a team like the Rockets what they're about. And they just can't be having multiple segments of unserious plays. So that forces Steve Kerr's hands. He sits Jonathan Kuminga and finally brings in Guy Santos. But the Warriors have no rhythm. They've lost the momentum that they were starting to build. Next thing you know, Curry has a turnover. GP2 ends up missing a wide open layup under the rim. The next time down, the possession's a mess. Guy Santos tries to catch a ball and pass it, but he passes it in traffic and turns it over. So he played for like less than 2 minutes, and then Jimmy Butler comes back into the game, and Guy Santos basically never saw the floor again in this game. And then to end the second quarter, Draymond gets into it with lead ref Ben Taylor. And to be honest with you, that is on nobody but Draymond. If you're Draymond, why in the world are you instigating and talking to the ref? You know, Draymond is trying to gain position on Alperen Sengun, and he's being extra aggressive from the back and blatantly giving him an elbow, kind of shoving him a little bit. And Ben Taylor is kind of talking to him and probably saying something like, hey, be careful with that, watch that, or something along those lines. All Draymond has to do is be like, okay, I heard you. Instead of doing that, he's yapping and arguing with the ref as the play is going on. And then he tells the ref to call the foul. He's daring the ref to call the foul. Next thing you know, Draymond puts his hand on Alperen Sengun close to his throat. And then Ben Taylor ends up calling a technical foul on Draymond. I believe there was a foul called there as well because it was a foul. You know, when Draymond gets into it like this with the refs and starts arguing with them incessantly, even after they already gave him a tech, I mean, honestly, that stuff is completely unacceptable at this point and at this juncture of the season because that stuff is not advantageous to the Warriors. You're actually hurting the Warriors and you're making it now about Draymond Green over the Warriors. And you know me, I'm never going to be okay with any player doing stuff like that where you are being a detriment to the Warriors for the sake of yourself. And that is exactly what Draymond is doing when he's doing nothing but arguing with the refs. So that ends up being Draymond's 3rd foul to end the second quarter. And then the 3rd quarter comes. And then he picks up an early 4th foul. And then there was a play where Moses Moody drops off a pass to Draymond. He's trying to finish it over Alperen Sengun's contest. And he goes up strong. And that is an and one. Take a look at this play. That is and one. It is not his fault that as he's going up like this with the ball, Alperen Sengun puts his face right there. That is a natural motion going up with the ball right under the rim if you're Draymond. And he's able to finish the play, and that should have been an and one. Unfortunate for Alperen Sengun's face, but he planted his face there. But guess what? Ben Taylor decides to get retribution on Draymond and decides to not only keep it a foul on Draymond, but also goes and takes a look at the monitor and decides that it's a flagrant foul. Are you kidding me? If you're the NBA, you have to punish Ben Taylor for that action right there, because that gave Draymond his 5th foul, and they assessed a flagrant foul, and it completely turned and flipped the game to the Rockets because the Rockets already had momentum going to begin that third quarter. They went on a 9-3 run. Once again, enough with the small lineup. It is not an advantage to the Warriors to start that small lineup against playoff caliber teams. The last 3 games, the Warriors starters have not won those minutes against the starters of the other team. The Warriors have been winning these games despite that starting lineup not being good enough and setting no defensive tone whatsoever against the other team. Not a real one anyway. But yes, with that play, with that and one play by Draymond, they had an opportunity to kind of get back into the swing of it. Instead, Draymond has 5 fouls, and he's out of the game for the entirety of that third quarter. And this is not okay if you're Ben Taylor. However, Draymond started and precipitated this movement by doing what he did to end that second quarter. And that's just completely unacceptable. And then Steve Kerr makes an insane move. He decides to bring in Jonathan Kuminga as Draymond's replacement at the center spot. Are you kidding me? You have Jimmy Butler and Jonathan Kuminga as your power forward and center. Steve Kerr, are you out of your mind? Next thing you know, of course, the Warriors are not able to grab any rebound, and then he decides to bring in Kevon Looney for Moses Moody. And now you're playing a lineup of Kevon Looney, Jimmy Butler, and Jonathan Kuminga. Much more palatable than Moses Moody, Jimmy Butler, and Jonathan Kuminga. What are we talking about? Man, when Steve Kerr goes into complete incompetent mode, it just drives me insane. You are the coach of this team. There is no way that for any segment of this game that you thought a lineup of Moses Moody, Jimmy Butler, and Jonathan Kuminga would be an okay lineup to have out there at the same time. Ain't no way. But the good news is that at least he made a quick adjustment and got Looney in there. And fair play to Kuminga in that third quarter. He made multiple good plays in terms of looking for the extra pass. He was able to find Buddy Hield a couple of times, had a tough putback layup on a miss, doing his job from a rebounding standpoint. So that third quarter was pretty decent for Kuminga. And that's the issue with Kuminga, is that he can give you segments where he's pretty good. And sometimes he can give you some segments where he's really good. But then there are other times where he's just complete and utter nonsense because he's in me mode. And what I'm trying to tell you guys is that for a team trying to contend for a title, you can't have a player having these insane moments of looking completely unserious on the floor. Because a couple of plays can create new momentum for the other team. And those are the moments that you can never have if you're a team contending for a title. The Warriors need to get serious and understand that those moments cannot be had. And if players are having moments like that, well, then you're going to have to end up ultimately limiting their minutes. And that's kind of what I foresee happening when the Warriors get into the playoffs or possibly play in. And I'm just completely devastated that Guy Santos is out of the rotation, man. The Warriors have been on this run that they've been on with Guy Santos in rotation. You can't punish him because of the return of Jonathan Kuminga, who's not being consistent enough. You have to have next to nothing but energetic and powerful players coming off your bench. And Steph Curry wanted Guy Santos in crunch time, not Jonathan Kuminga in the last game. So if you got a problem with what I'm saying at this point, go argue with Steph Curry, because it's his words, not mine. You know, ultimately, the Warriors ended up giving up 15 offensive rebounds, and I am telling you, that is unserious. If you think the Warriors are going to win in the playoffs playing this style, this small lineup, small units to start the first quarter and the third quarter, and then Kevon Looney is basically your only big coming off your bench because Quinton Post cannot be used in a more serious situation and in a more physical situation, the Warriors will fail. And then you have Guy Santos not playing at all on top of that. A lot of those rebounds that the Warriors failed to get, if you had Guy Santos on the floor, he is getting them. And in a game like this where Steph Curry can't get going, Jimmy Butler has to step up and be more serious about his own scoring and making more of an impact in that regard. Ultimately, Butler also only ended up taking 7 shots. Your 2 best players combined for 17 shots? I mean, that's just not good enough. But yeah, Ben Taylor and the refs were really in on this one. Steph Curry gets nailed on a 3-point shot. Nothing is called. Steph Curry gets shoved off the ball by Dillon Brooks. No call. But ultimately, you got to give Ime Udoka some credit because he was playing playoff style basketball. He, in that fourth quarter, was basically running a 3 7-footer lineup. He had a combination of Alperen Şengün, Jabari Smith, and Steven Adams on the floor at the same time. And you know how Steve Kerr responded? He responded with a 3-guard lineup. Against 7-footers on the floor at the same time, Steve Kerr puts out a 3-guard lineup. And to be fair to that 3-guard lineup, they did the absolute best that they could, on top of just Jimmy Butler and Draymond on the floor at the same time as the 4 and the 5, alongside 3 guards. It's too small! And Buddy Hield was having a very nice game from a shooting standpoint. He really got it going in this one and kept the Warriors in it a bunch of times. But whatever the Warriors are able to do offensively is getting undone by offensive rebounds grabbed by the Rockets. You know, I distinctly recall Trayce Jackson-Davis starting last season and they were playing against these Rockets and he owned Amen Thompson. Go look at the stat sheet from last season. Amen Thompson is an athletic marvel, but from a size standpoint, he is too small for a guy like Trayce Jackson-Davis. But like I've been saying all along, all I can do is dream about the Warriors getting more serious and getting to bigger lineups. Just like the Rockets have. They have incorporated Steven Adams more into their situations, more lineups. Now he's at the center spot and Alperen Şengün is at the power forward spot. And they're really big and they're more viable from a defensive standpoint. And it's when Steven Adams got into the game where the game became more difficult for a guy like GP2 because he's only 6'2", and even though he's been finishing left and right, with Steven Adams in there protecting their paint, GP2 was getting his shot swatted. And at some point, Steve Kerr is going to have to match the size of other teams, or at the very least, get somewhat close to it. And by the way, more size and more screeners is also going to get more shots for a guy like Steph Curry because he's going to have bigger bodies that are able to set more screens and better screens. In a rough and tumble game like this one, those are the kinds of things that's going to make a difference for the Warriors. Anyway, like I said, the Warriors had a major opportunity tonight to be in the 4th seed. Instead, they're in a 4-way tie for the 5th seed and the 8th seed. Essentially, the Warriors are going to have to try to win out for the remaining 4 games to ensure that they end up being a playoff team and not a play-in team. If they lose another game, it is very possible that they end up in a play-in situation. And in the play-in, in a one-off situation, anything can happen. We've already seen that movie over and over when it comes to the Warriors. They've been in the play-in 2 of the last 4 years, and they got booted out and never made it to the playoffs when that situation came about. And that is the very last thing that we need to see happen to the Warriors. But I'm gonna say it again. The Rockets got more serious by inserting Steven Adams as a more central part of whatever it is that they're doing, and they have become a more serious team. It's a part of the reason why they were able to take care of business against the OKC Thunder as well in their previous game. And what I'm trying to tell you is that the Warriors also have another level to reach when they go bigger, particularly with the starting lineup. And Steve Kerr must realize this sooner than later to ensure that the Warriors actually have a shot to do anything this season. Beyond the regular season, that is. That's all I got for tonight. Very tough loss. Hopefully they bounce back and are able to win out in their remaining 4 games. It's a big ask. The Warriors are ultimately 20-3 when Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler are playing at the same time. So that is very powerful. But to play at that pace, man, that's tough. And playing small all day and night and being taxed the way they have been, that is difficult. But ultimately, we'll see how things shake out. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.